The life in the hereafter. What does the Quran say? Translation of Jahan-e Fada. Ghulam Ahmad Parwez, 1969. About the author. Ghulam Ahmad Parwez was born in Batala, Punjab, in British India on the 9th of July 1903 into a profoundly religious family. His grandfather, who was deeply religious and belonged to the Hanafi school of thought, was a renowned religious scholar who intended to make the author inherit his knowledge and religious understanding. As a consequence, his education and training was carried out under the direction of his grandfather. While he studied the traditional religious teachings, he also had the desire and inkling to question its content using his intellect and reasoning. This led to his inner conflict with the external religious environment, and he continued to question the prevalent religious concepts and practices. He noticed that whatever was being taught as part of the religion was being referred to some imam or religious scholar for authority. It was also noted in the religious literature that whatever the forefathers had followed should be obeyed without any question, and this was considered to be a requirement of Islam. For Parwez, this did not satisfy his desire to seek reason and logic in every claim and statement made within the religious literature. However, he could not express these doubts and reservations initially due to his respect for his grandfather and the constraints of the religious environment which prevailed at the time in his town. Later, due to his employment, he moved to Lahore, now part of Pakistan, and found a degree of freedom to question some of these religious concepts and beliefs. After the death of his grandfather, he found complete freedom to pursue his line of inquiry and research into the prevalent Islamic beliefs, doctrines, ideologies, and religious practices. This led to his discovering that most of these have been acquired from others. He tried to study the Quran using the traditional religious approach but was unable to find the answers to all his doubts, which required satisfaction from a logical point of view. He also studied the life of the last messenger, and the establishment of the Islamic State in the 7th century, and his quest to determine the cause which contributed to this greatest revolution, based on the Quran. He especially paid attention to the statement from the last messenger, "The Quran is not a product of my thinking or that of any other human being, and that this is the message from Allah." He soon learned the procedure to understand the Quran through his contact with the famous philosopher and poet, Allama Iqbal, who had a deep interest in the Quran. Parwez concluded that to understand the Quran one has to understand three fundamentally important points. 1. The Quran calls itself light, Nur, and a light does not need any external source or aid to make itself visible. It makes itself evident, and also exposes the reality of those things which are within its domain. 2. The Quran is revealed in the Arabic language, and to understand it correctly one needs to understand the Arabic context which was prevalent at the time of its revelation. 3. The Quran has guided us by saying that through Tasrif al-Ayat, through cross-reference within the verses of the Quran, it makes its guidance clear. E.g. c. 6, 106. In order to meet the second requirement regarding the precise meaning of the Arabic words in the Quran, he researched and compiled At-Lagat al-Quran, now translated into English, which is a dictionary of all the words and terms used in the Quran, which includes the meanings which were prevalent among the Arabs at the time of the Quranic revelation. For the third requirement of Tasrif al-Ayat, the Quran is different from books written by human beings, where the latter are usually divided based on various subjects. The Quran is based on mentioning a reality in one verse or verses, and then its further explanation is noted in another place or places. For example, in Surah In'am the Quran states, "And thus do we explain the signs by various verses, so that they acknowledge you have explained them, and we make the Quran clear for a people who know." 6. 106. In order to meet this requirement, Parwez felt the need to compile all the verses under one subject as referred in various verses of the Quran, and he compiled a book in Urdu entitled Tabweeb ul-Quran, i.e., classification of the Quran. This made it easy to refer to various subjects and look at all the verses mentioned in the Quran relating to a subject. Along with writing and producing literature on the Quran, Parwez also held a regular weekly meeting in Lahore to deliver a Dars lecture explaining the Quran in Urdu, and these are also available in audio and video recordings. He dedicated most of his life to researching the Quran and its significance in relation to presenting an alternative solution to human problems, and answering questions relating to human creation, its purpose, and the question of death and the next life. He also participated in the struggle for independence during the period 1938 to 1947, and the creation of Pakistan, which was based on the ideology of the Quran with a view to establishing an Islamic state for the Muslims of the subcontinent. He worked very closely with the founder of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Quaid-e-Azam, or Great Leader, and had regular discussions with him on various aspects of the message of the Quran, in order to support the movement for a separate state for the Muslims of India and to counter the arguments put forward by some of the religious lobby who opposed the creation of Pakistan. He published a monthly journal called Tolu-e-Islam commencing in 1938. Parwez joined the Indian Civil Service in the Home Department in 1927. And after the creation of Pakistan, he migrated to Karachi, and continued to serve in the same department till 1955, when he took early retirement, and devoted the rest of his life fully to his work on the Quran. He moved to Lahore from Karachi and settled there. He left this life on the 24th of February 1985 in Lahore, and his body was laid to rest in Lahore. Forward. The aim of my life is to understand the Quran and then to pass on this understanding to mankind. The series called Ma'arif al-Quran, Introducing the Quran, was started in the 1930s, and as a consequence many books have been published, including the following. 1. Mano Yazdan, The Quranic Concept of God, The Relation Between God and Man. The book has now been translated into English. The Human Self and Allah. 2. Iblis o Adam, The Quranic Concepts about Adam, Man, Iblis, Satan, the Angels, Revelation and Risalat, Messengerhood. 3. Jew-e-Noah, The Narratives in the Quran from the Messenger Noah to the Messenger Shoaib. 4. Barq-e-Tor, The Narrative in the Quran about the Messenger Moses and describing Bani Israel. 5. Shola-e-Mastor, detailing the life of the Messenger Jesus. 6. Miraj-e-Insaniyat, The Challenges and Struggles of the Last Messenger Muhammad as detailed in the Quran. 7. Insan ne kiya socha, Urdu for What Did Man Think? In the absence of revelation, what did human intellect and reasoning consider about human problems and their solution? 8. Islam Kiya Hai, An Introduction to Deen, Way of Life, as expounded in the Quran. The book has been translated in English. What is Islam? In addition to the above publications, other books are available and should also be included in this list. Kitab al-Taqdir, Ligat al-Quran and Mafhum al-Quran. In this series, life in the hereafter is an important concept, and there was a demand from those people who had a strong desire to understand this aspect of the Quranic message. I am glad that with the blessings of Allah, I am discharging this duty in the form of this book. As is evident, issues relating to the next life belong to metaphysics. And with our present level of consciousness we cannot understand the reality of the next life in the same way as we do the visible life around us in the physical world. The Quran has discussed these realities using metaphors and similes. As we understand, this is the correct way to refer to these realities. Metaphors can be understood with reference to the existing level of understanding of available human knowledge at a particular time and according to the educational and intellectual level of the reader. This is the reason why the explanations given regarding these realities at any point in time is likely to change as human knowledge and understanding progress in the future. So this can never be the last word, and subsequent generations will draw their own conclusions from their study of the Quran. I have interpreted the metaphors and similes used in the Quran by this method, and my purpose is to present this understanding to others, and to invite them to reflect on these realities. If others study the Quran in detail and reach a different conclusion concerning any of the aspects discussed, then I will be pleased to ponder again on these issues. I am grateful to Allah for the positive response I have received from people with regard to Quranic understanding, and the interest it has generated to examining the matters discussed in the Quran. I remember when I had initially begun this work, that there were very few people with the same degree of interest in the Quran and its guidance to mankind. Now, with the blessing of Allah, interest in the Quran is developing in many countries across the world. This has also helped the younger generation who are unhappy with the prevalent traditional religious beliefs, to turn to the Quran on finding their questions answered in my work. This is all because of the Quran. I have now reached the latter part of my life where I am closer to the other side of the river. It is my strong desire that the last days of my life are spent in the pursuit of studying the Quranic message, which has been an objective of my life. Our Sustainer, accept this from us. For you are the all-hearing and the all-knowing. 2. 127. G. A. Parwez. 25B Gulberg 2. Lahore. October 1969. Editor's note. This book, entitled Jahan-e-Farda, literally meaning the life of tomorrow, written by G. A. Parwez in 1969, was originally written in Urdu, and it was felt that there was an urgent need to translate it into English to make it accessible to a much wider audience around the world. The book was initially translated and published in 2015. However, after the publication of this book I translated, edited and published another 4 books written by the author, and my own understanding about the Quran became significantly enhanced, particularly with regard to aspects relating to the human self and its development. So in light of this, I decided to revise this note and add some new footnotes to clarify some of the issues relating to the human self and its further development. In addition, I felt it was necessary to discuss the importance of human death in the light of the Quran and bring in some points discussed by the author in his other books. The text of the original book remains otherwise unchanged. Parwez developed an understanding of the Quran to such a level that he came to grips with the finer details of the system of Deen, and having read most of his major works, this has enabled me to increase my understanding of this, and to examine further the issues facing man at the fundamental level of the human psyche. This being an important work which deals with the human self and its accountability and death. And the concept of the hereafter provides an opportunity to share my understanding in this note on this very important issue of our life with the readers. When reading books by Parwez, we need to keep in mind that he is very focused on the concept of the system of Deen as revealed in the Quran. And the aim of this is to establish a system in the human world which can resolve all conflicts and chaos created by those systems which are devised by the human intellect working on its own. The Quran has stated the following as the purpose of human creation. Allah created the heavens and the earth for just ends. Haq. And in order that each self may find the recompense of what it has earned, and none of them is treated unjustly. 45. 22. See also. 29. 7. 34. 410. 44. This verse is fundamental to the understanding of the Quran. Human accountability, life in this world, death and the life of the hereafter. This book covers one of the permanent values called the law of requital in detail in chapters 1 to 3. It is sufficient to state here that the Quran puts full responsibility for his deeds on the shoulders of man by virtue of possessing a free will and thus freedom of choice and intent, and invites his attention to the reality that whatever he does individually and collectively in this life will bear consequences. Indeed, the world we find ourselves in at any point in time during our life is the sum total of what human beings have done in the past. And the future will be based on what they do today, which will add to their own past. Death is an important part of human life, since it is something each one of us will have to face sooner or later, and the Quran has covered this aspect in great detail. After translating the book The Human Self and Allah in 2019 by the author, my own interest increased manifold. The more I read and examined my own consciousness, the more I realized that there is a great deal more which needs exploring in the human psyche. The hard problem of consciousness is still to be fully comprehended, and I wondered if this could be resolved further through the Quran, logically and rationally. If the Quran claims to be the revelation from Allah, and also declares that it can help find answers to all questions relating to human life and the psyche, then it should also address this issue of human consciousness. Before going further, I would like to quote here from the book by Herbert Fingeret titled Death, in which he quotes the following from Sigmund Freud. Indeed, our conscious does not believe in our own death. It conducts itself as if immortal. What we call our unconscious lies at the deepest instinct-driven strata of the mind. It knows nothing negative, no negation. Contradictories dwell side by side in it. Hence it does not know its own death, to which only negative content can be ascribed. Nothing in the instinctual drives can lead us to the belief in death. He quotes further, elaborating another important observation of Sigmund Freud. However, we do acknowledge death for strangers and enemies, and we award it to them as willingly and unconcernedly as did primeval man. Here a distinction presents itself, one that not in the real world is held to be decisive. Our unconscious does not carry out the killing, it merely thinks it and wishes it. Then he sums it up as follows. Let us sum up. Our unconscious is quite impervious to the idea of our own death, murderous toward strangers, and, just as in primeval times, ambivalent toward loved ones. We may not agree with all of the above, but we can find some evidence for this from our own inner thought processes, and the behavior of others in the world. People go to extraordinary risks to put their own life in danger, and how many people live an unhealthy lifestyle despite being aware of the harmful effects of their choices, e.g., smoking, drinking alcohol, taking drugs, overeating, unhealthy food choices, etc. Which essentially means they do not seriously consider the possibility of their own death being imminent, and live life as if they are immortal, whereas we all know that our physical death is inevitable at some point in the future. Then the second point which merits our attention is the possibility of the existence of another life following our physical death. Most people live their life as if there is no life in the hereafter, i.e., we are defined by our physical body and brain, and since both are physical, as and when we die, that is the end of our life. But what if there is another life beyond death? Then what will happen if our conduct in this life is the basis for the nature of that future life? This means that acceptance or rejection of the nature of the life in the hereafter should be based on our intellectual reasoning, and not on our emotive state of mind, which only considers immediate gains, making death seem like an event in some far distant future. Some of the questions which merit our attention are: A. How can I convince myself of my own impending physical death so that I can become willing, without fear, to explore alternative options of living this life? B. What benefits will I gain by exploring the assumption that human life does not end in this world, but continues on beyond physical death? C. Is it possible to find evidence for the life of the hereafter by following the guidance of the Quran? D. There is so much misery and injustice in the world, which can clearly be seen to be created through human hands. If this life has a higher purpose and meaning, then surely there should be a way to address this issue. What can I do in terms of my own development which can help in firstly understanding the purpose of human creation, and then beyond this in helping to alleviate these problems in this world? I know that there will be many more questions over and above these, but the point which I am trying to clarify is that the Quran opens itself to those who seek answers to their questions, and I, and the author, have found the Quran to be one such book. There are 2 verses in the Quran which drew my attention in particular, as noted below. And who have Iman in the revelation sent to you, the Messenger Muhammad, and sent before your time, and they have the assurance of the hereafter. 2. 4. The statement that they have the assurance of the hereafter is related to the state of understanding within our consciousness. What can we do in this life so that we are able to develop our consciousness, our inner reality, to that level where one can achieve this state? Here, the Quran comes to our rescue and declares that 2 things are fundamental in understanding its guidance. Firstly, acquire Iman as it describes, and secondly, as a consequence of acquiring this Iman, do righteous deeds, again as noted within the Quran. But then what will happen as a consequence of this? It then states that by following this guidance, establishing the system of deen, since we come to understand the functioning of the human world, we will free ourselves from the fear and despair associated with the man-made systems. The 2nd verse states, Behold, in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of night and day there indeed are signs for men of understanding. Men who reflect in the creation of Allah, standing, sitting and lying down, and contemplate in the creation of the heavens and the earth. Then come to this conclusion: Our Rab, Sustainer, not for naught have you created this. 3. 190 to 191. As noted above in 45:22, human accountability is at the heart of human creation, and the universe would be meaningless without the existence of human beings. In this verse the Quran has stated that the purpose of the heavens and the earth is to create a being with free will and intent who, using his intellect and reasoning, takes over the responsibility of creation on a micro scale on this earth. The importance of Iman is that it guides us in creating a new self within us, which cannot be created otherwise without the guidance of the Quran. Then, as a consequence of acquiring this Iman, one develops a strong urge to do righteous deeds with a view to coming to grips with human problems in the world. In this process, once this newly created self develops further as a consequence of these deeds, for which one does not expect any reward, it became evident to me that the Quran motivates us to move away from our personal desires so that we can understand mankind as one whole community, i.e., as equal beings at the level of the body and self. However, when we witness the misery, exploitation, injustice, slavery and humiliation of ordinary people across the world under the man-made systems, the question arises, why did Allah go to this extent to tolerate so much chaos in the world? Why did he not create some being for the next stage of life directly, rather than placing this physical being into this environment where there is so much suffering? Iqbal writes in the following two passages. Life offers a scope for ego activity, and death is the first test of the synthetic activity of ego. There are no pleasure-giving and pain-giving acts. There are only ego-sustaining and ego-dissolving acts. It is the deed that prepares the ego for dissolution or disciplines him for a future career. The principle of the ego-sustaining deeds is respect for the ego in myself as well as in others. Personal immortality, then, is not ours as of right. It is to be achieved by personal effort. Man is only a candidate for it. Divine knowledge must be conceived as a living creative activity to which the objects that appear to exist in their own right are organically related. By conceiving God's knowledge as a kind of reflecting mirror, we no doubt save his foreknowledge of future events. But it is obvious that we do so at the expense of his freedom. The future certainly pre-exists in the organic whole of God's creative life, but it pre-exists as an open possibility, not as a fixed order of events with definite outlines. Giving human beings free will and the ability to make decisions means that Allah does not impose any constraints, whether physical or psychological, to influence this decision-making by man. The Quran declares that this is your world, you do whatever you like. 40:41. But the consequences will be according to the law of requital as noted in 45:22. It should be noted here that nowhere in the Quran does Allah state that he knows what a man will do tomorrow, whereas it is mentioned that Allah does come between every human thought and him. E.g. Do you not see that Allah does know that in the heavens and on earth? There is not a secret consultation between three, but he makes the fourth among them, nor between fewer nor more, but he is with them, wheresoever they be. In the end will he tell them the truth of their conduct, on the day of judgment. For Allah has full knowledge of all things. 58:7. The second point, as noted in the second quote from Iqbal, is that Allah has given this freedom to man himself by his own choice, i.e., he wanted to create man with a free will to then be allowed to live his life under the law of requital, to thus be held accountable for his actions in this life. Understanding this point is important in order to comprehend the significance of human, or my own, creation, and thus the significance of the Quranic guidance. Allah wished to create a being in order to allow him to make his decisions freely, without any constraints whatsoever, and to provide him with guidance through revelation as an option for him to choose to live by. In order to illustrate this, I will quote the following verses related to Moses when he was commanded to go to Pharaoh to pass to him the invitation to accept divine guidance. And Moses was fearful of the consequences of meeting Pharaoh, since he, Moses, had killed one of Pharaoh's men. The Quran covers this in detail. Go both Moses and his brother Aaron of you to Pharaoh, for he has indeed transgressed all bounds. But speak to him mildly, perchance he may take warning and fear the consequences of his acts. They, Moses and Aaron, replied, Our Rab, we fear lest he hasten with insolence against us or lest he transgresses all bounds. He, Allah, said, Fear not, for I am with you, I hear and see. 20:43-45. See also 10:61-58. 1. Reflect on the last part of this verse where Allah has not stated that he, Pharaoh, will not harm you, but instead states, Do not fear as I hear and see, meaning that all of Pharaoh's actions are being watched closely. This is how the law of requital works in human life. Thus, Pharaoh was free to make any decision, and this decision was not constrained by any predetermined decree or act. At that point there was only one thing which was certain, that Pharaoh will not be allowed to harm Moses and Aaron, in case he decides this. So, in the creation of the universe, the appearance of man is not some chance event, the outcome of some random evolutionary process which was never carefully planned and directed and without a purpose behind it. The ability to make choices and then live by the consequences of these choices has a purpose, and in order to achieve this purpose, physical death forms an important part of this scheme. Firstly, the Quran states that this free will and intent comes from the divine energy which is given to man, and which manifests through our I and its consciousness. Secondly, a finite physical body is provided to help create a new self, a new reality within us. And during this process of living a physical life, our brain and mind act as the medium to help develop this newly created self. Outside the domain of Iman, the self does get created, but since it is not according to the Quranic values, this one will not be of the kind which will go forward to develop further in the hereafter. If we study this book from this point of view, then we will see that the finer details of this process will emerge clearly before us. Another point which relates to the fulfillment of human desires requires profound reflection. We try to accomplish our burgeoning desires as we continue to live our life. It is our desires and intellect which make the human world so dynamic. But if everyone tries to fulfill his own desires using their intellect alone, then this will inevitably lead to conflicts in the world. This is the world we find around us, i.e., the creation of purely human intellect. In order to prevent these desires from turning human society into chaos, society and governments devise laws. But since these laws are formulated by those who also have desires, and without any external guidance and criterion, thus these desires based on our emotions introduce bias in these laws, e.g., the wealthy and large corporations receive bigger tax cuts, which leads to an ever-widening gap between the rich and the poor. The issue here is how to create a desire within us which can benefit us both in this life as well as in the hereafter. For example, if I never have the desire to think about the hereafter, then I simply cannot have my reality formed in a way which will include the possibility of another life. For the hereafter, there has to be a level of inquisitiveness within me which should lead to further exploration and inquiry, and then the desire to find an answer which will appeal to my reasoning. This is why the Quran has made it clear that for those who look for guidance in this life, this book is for them. Why should we consider the possibility of another life in the hereafter? And if the Quran presents the concept of a new self which can be verified through the process of creating a self based on Iman and then developing it through righteous deeds, what prevents me from giving this a try? What do I lose by continuing to live my life like anyone else? I.e., a physical life to meet daily needs, but with a different conviction acquired through my own reasoning and application, which helps me to gain more psychological freedom and also helps to make my life simpler by getting rid of unsubstantiated beliefs. I should follow this path and see if this results in a self which can become free from fear of the uncertainty of physical death, and which leads to a better understanding of the world in which I live. It will entail more willing and enjoyable discipline, and will require greater intellectual effort, but in the process I will become more alive and aware of the issues of human life which will otherwise remain concealed from my eyes. Together with this book, the author has written another book, titled The Human Self and Allah, which will help to understand the concept of Allah presented by the Quran based on evidence. The self which we create through Iman requires a higher self as a model, as this is an intrinsic need for the human self to develop. The Quran has made it clear that no human being can serve as a model for another human being. This demeans his stature as a human being possessing a self with free will and intent. 379 144. Nor can human desires alone guide us in this life. However, by bringing desires and intellect within the guidance of the Quran, we can create that self new life, which the Quran puts forward. The following points elaborate this further. 1. Each one of us is a complete unit with our body and cognitive abilities. We have an I and the consciousness associated with it. 2. We live our life and gain experiences, and then we die. Death is for everyone. There are two concepts of life on the basis of which we live our life, i.e., life ends with death or life goes on beyond death. At the level of belief, these two lives are lived differently. In the life after death, what is discussed in this book is that the concept of life beyond death put forward is based on fact. 3. As we live our life, we create an inner reality which belongs to each one of us. The same events observed by the same people will create different realities within them. The issue here is, can we create a reality based on external criteria against which we can judge it, and then compare this with the reality which is created outside of these external criteria? 4. We are the only creature in the world who gives meaning to the things around us. Just imagine that if there were no human beings around, the universe will still exist, but it will be without anyone to appreciate it, and this will appear to have no purpose. 5. The only route available to enter this life is through the procedure of being born as a child, and every child is equal to any other child. Each comes with a physical body and some cognitive potentials. Each of them is going to die at some point in the future. However, whatever we become psychologically through our experiences of life cannot be shared or passed on to others. Hence, what kind of being psychologically this life experience turns us into cannot be reborn or reproduced. 6. The sphere of our intellect is finite, which on its own is unable to comprehend reality as a whole about human life, whereas the Quran presents itself as the whole reality from the ultimate reality, i.e., Allah, and provides guidance on issues related to all of human life. The revelation of the Quran helps us to increase the expanse of the sphere of our intellect and the consciousness, thus enabling us to solve those issues of life which are created by our desires through our intellect. For more details, read the book by the author titled The Human Self and Iblis. The Quran has referred to this in few verses and draws our attention to this aspect of our life repeatedly, e.g., every self, nafs, shall have experience of death. 185. In other words, if I understand the human self, then I should be able to understand the relationship between the self and the body. Related to this is the question of acquiring Iman, on which the Quran puts repeated emphasis, e.g., verse 2, 177. And connected with this is the functioning of the law of requital as noted in verse 45:22. The Quran is a book which deals with the human mind and frequently refers to the subject of human accountability. When reading this book, the following points should be noted. Human beings have free will, allowing them to make choices in life. They are free to make a choice, but they cannot alter the results of this choice. Because of this free will, they do not have any internal guidance, unlike the other creatures on earth. Every human being wishes to increase his personal happiness and minimize his pain, and also wishes to obtain quick results from his deeds in this life. This is the condition of man without Quranic guidance. The Quran cites the purpose of human life as being the accountability of each individual, which works through the effects on the human self of its own actions, known as the law of requital. The Quran asks us to take a projected view of our actions in the present life and the effects of these actions on our life after death, repeatedly reminding us about the working of the law of requital. The Quran draws our attention to the significance of human beings, who can make sense of the world around them, and the implication of man's ability to make choices. The Quran invites us to its guidance and to follow the permanent values. Divine laws. The Quran provides an objective concept of Allah, which is unique and based on the divine attributes. This serves as a model for man at the thinking level, which then helps to develop the human self for the next stage of evolution, beyond the physical existence in this world, i.e., for the life in the hereafter. So, this concept of God as per the Quran is a necessity for the human self if it wishes to develop further. The Quran leaves it to us to make this choice and then explains the changes which a developed self experiences in this life once it begins to follow the path defined by the Quran. The Quran invites us to use our intellect and reasoning to analyze its message and the permanent values. It lays emphasis on the use of the human mind, i.e., intellect and the ability to reason, which it calls a new creation. 23:14, and which places us above all other known creations in the universe. Thus it serves as a tool for our intellect, reflection, and reasoning with which to look at human creation, and then helps us to become what Allah wishes us to become, i.e., to live this life and from there be able to move on to the next one for further development. Since our thinking precedes whatever we do, this means that behind every visible act there is a thought which can be viewed as an invisible act. The motive behind this thought decides what type of impact this will have on ourself. So being aware of our thinking processes in all our decision making and thus enhancing our self-consciousness, and constantly referring back to the permanent values, is the central focus of the Quranic guidance. This increase in our cognitive consciousness through the study of the Quran is what it terms as life in this world. 8:24, thus providing a meaning to our life. We have also used the term Allah instead of God throughout the book when the Quran is being referenced, and the term God is only used when specific parts of the Quran are not being referred to. Allah, as used in the Quran, is a very comprehensive attribute which encompasses all of his other divine attributes and refers to his complete sovereignty in the universe. The Quran explains the relationship of Allah with the human world and the purpose of human creation, i.e., the accountability process and its functioning according to the law of requital. 45:22. The Quran makes use of metaphors to make things clear. Metaphors are an important means of understanding the world around us and in communication. In their book, Metaphors We Live By, Lakoff and Johnson, 1980, explain the role of metaphors in human understanding. We have found that metaphor is pervasive in everyday life, not just in language but in thought and action. Our ordinary conceptual system, in terms of which we both think and act, is fundamentally metaphorical in nature. With regard to the human self, in his book titled Man for Himself, Eric Fromm, 1947, has noted the following. Birth is only one particular step in a continuum which begins with conception and ends with death. All that is between these two poles is a process of giving birth to one's potentialities, of bringing to life all that is potentially given in the two cells. But while physical growth proceeds by itself, if only the proper conditions are given, the process of birth on the mental plane, in contrast, does not occur automatically. It requires productive activity to give life to the emotional and intellectual potentialities of man, to give birth to his self. It is part of the tragedy of the human situation that the development of the self is never completed. Even under the best conditions, only part of man's potentialities is realized. Man always dies before he is fully born. Erich Fromm obviously had no access to the Quranic concept of life in the hereafter, which would have answered his concluding remarks in the above quoted paragraph, i.e., that man will in fact get a chance to realize his potentialities as life does continue beyond his physical death. However, as the Quran explains, this will only be available to those who make a deliberate choice in this direction while living in this world by following the permanent values. This translation covers all of the aspects which are discussed in the original Urdu version. However, the Arabic text of the verses from the Quran has not been included, and readers can refer to the Quran for these details. The translations used for the verses of the Quran are mainly from the translation of the Quran by Abdullah Yusuf Ali, with some alterations made using the exposition of the Quran published by Tolu-e-Islam to elaborate the meanings where required. The relevant references for these verses have been noted, the first figure indicating the relevant surah, chapter, and the second figure after the colon referring to the verse number e.g. 214 indicates Surah 2, verse 214. The book is divided into 20 chapters which cover various aspects of the subject. Chapters 1 to 5 cover the topics which come under the subject of the law of requital. This explains the process of human accountability in this life and its working in our daily life. Chapters 6 to 7 discuss the aspects of repentance, tawbah and maghfirat, and the Day of Judgment in detail. Chapters 8 to 11 cover the consequences of the law of requital both at an individual and a collective level and their effects on human life in this world, with some reference to the life in the hereafter. This also reflects on the conduct of nations and their rise and fall in this world. Chapters 12 to 15 deal with the life in the hereafter in relation to the life in this world. Chapters 16 to 19 deal with the consequences of human deeds individually as well as collectively and discusses various forms of punishments which are applicable in this life. Chapter 20 gives details on the concept of paradise, Jannat, and covers various metaphorical terms used in the Quran in relation to this life. As is the case with all translations, it is difficult to translate everything literally, as this can affect the flow and meaning of the original text. In order to clarify some of the words and terms, explanations have been provided as footnotes at the bottom of the page, and ed. is written against these additions indicating this is from the editor. Footnotes without ed. are to be considered as being from the author himself. Finally, if after reading this book readers have any questions, please feel free to contact us at the address, email or Tolu-e-Islam website as given above. Finally, this work is a translation, and as such any ambiguity in the text in the English version which is not present in the Urdu version is my responsibility as a translator and not of the original author. Dr. Ijaz Rasool, Glasgow.